you, thank you. I never dreamed that I would be standing here in this moment to share some of the stories that I'm going to share with you today. Some of it is really difficult to hear and heart-wrenching. So thank you for going through this process with us. They called me brown sugar and Aunt Jemima. Chief Henry would laugh and never said anything to them. I was so scared I would get raped. That's just a small part of one story. One member of the Metro Nashville Police Department. They told us about it. It's clear racism that is alive and well within the Metro Police Department. It's obvious that sexism and sexual violence are very real problems and culturally and systemically ingrained into this department. This is why we are here today, to exercise our constitutionally protected First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and freedom to peacefully assemble, even though the General Assembly has voted to criminalize and attack our First Amendment rights. We know our Constitution matters. We know as patriotic Americans, it's our duty to speak out and stand up for the fundamental principles and values that so many have fought and died to protect. As an Army veteran, that includes my friends and many that I know. So we don't take this lightly. We want to honor law enforcement who continue day in and day out in this city to protect us, and we want to bring out and speak up about those that violate their trust and our trust. With all this said and done, I want to welcome Greta McLean up to read some more stories that you just have to hear. Our founder, Greta McLean.
This is a letter that we received about a week ago from a woman within the Metro Police Department. I know you're mainly looking at people who've been raped, but I think that this is important for you to hear. I was harassed almost daily by lieutenants, captains, and a couple deputy chiefs when I worked in the old CJC building. They'd pat me on the butt, ask if men really did get off on more cushion for the pushing. They would call the white women by their names, but I was always called girl. One captain asked if I used axle grease in my hair, or was it some type of special N-word grease. When I was walking to the restroom one time, I walked past a lieutenant who was talking to a detective and an officer. The lieutenant whispered something to the other two and then said, "I bet those big lips of yours are really good for sucking." I've been disrespected many times in my life, and I've tried not to let it get to me. But I can't help but wonder if the racism and hatred these men have in their hearts causes them to act so ignorant and disrespectful in the hallways of CJC, where they can easily be overheard. What do they do to black people in alleys, dark streets, or in parks after dark? Can't help but wonder if some of these so-called unsolved murders of black men were really random street violence, or did one of these hate-filled racists decide to teach some young man who may have mouthed off a little too much a lesson? Something to think about.
I'd like to invite Emily Redkin up the People's Plaza movement.
Today we are gathered here to talk about sexual violence within the MNPD department and the lack of accountability. As a survivor of sexual violence, this issue hits close to home, and so I'm really glad that the People's Plaza, which has also become so close to my heart, and Silent No Longer Tennessee are partnering together today. One of the goals of the People's Plaza Tennessee is to defund the police. This means cutting the overinflated budgets of police forces and reallocating those funds to communities in need. But defunding the police means so much more than that. By defunding the police, we can cut down on unnecessary police forces that use the power of the state to commit sexual violence with impunity. While sexual assault and rape are intimate issues, we must also recognize them as structural issues that intersect with and
Bluetooth
bolster other
disconnected.
forms of oppression.
Bluetooth
When we
pairing.
recognize that 1 in 3 women will experience sexual
Bluetooth
assault in their
connected.
lifetime, we must also recognize that this number is even higher for women of color, especially Black trans women. Sexual violence is an issue of racial oppression as well as misogyny. Since the inception of the United States, sexual violence has been used as a tool to enforce white supremacy and settler colonialism, as well as heteropatriarchy and the gender binary. The use of sexual violence against indigenous people and the imposition of colonial gender structures were a hallmark of stealing land and colonization. Chattel slavery uniquely targeted Black women with rape and sexual coercion as a function of property rights, white supremacy, and patriarchy. Even today, the imperialist policies of the United States allow and encourage the sexual violation of women and girls, particularly in African, Latin American, and Asian countries. There are countless examples of the use of sexual violence as a tool of heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism, with women of color and Black women in particular disproportionately targeted and affected. And all of this was done or is done with impunity and the lack of accountability. This continued history has created a normalized culture of sexual violence, a rape culture, that puts Black women's and women of color's bodies and securities at risk. How does this connect to policing and defunding the police? The lack of accountability in police departments against sexual violence, committed both against other officers and against civilians, is a manifestation of our society's rape culture. Reallocating funds from police budgets can make a material impact by diverting resources to racially and culturally sensitive services for survivors of sexual assault and rape. These funds can be used for anti-racist violence prevention programs. The possibilities for a new vision of the world to defund the police and to stop sexual violence as limitless, and visionary women of color, especially Black women, have led and continue to lead the way on this. The bleak reality of racialized sexual violence has not stopped women of color from using their imagination and courage to imagine new futures and alternatives to a police state rife with sexual violence. Organizations like Incite, Women, Gender Nonconforming, and Trans People of Color Against Violence, and Sister Song, and people like Angela Davis, Andrea Smith, Kimberly Crenshaw, Tarana Burke, and Sarah Deer, and Lagatwe Wanjuki, and many more lead us in thinking about new futures. To fight to defund the police and to stop sexual violence takes imagination and courage. It also takes imagination and courage to imagine a future without sexual violence. And while we still have police, we will not have a future without sexual violence. We must not only demand accountability, but we must imagine a world where the social norms of over-policing and sexual violence are not routinized and are not accepted. We must work toward a better world for ourselves.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to invite up Emily Radke from People's Plaza as well. Hannah? I'm sorry, Emily. Hannah.
My name's Hannah. For those of you who don't know, thank you. I've been holding space and fighting alongside the community at the People's Plaza for 2 months. I know now what brought me here to Tennessee, and I have never been more resolute in my hope for this beautiful future we are building. I first want to acknowledge and thank the women of the plaza who have made my heart grow 10 sizes. I would name names, but it would take too long. Bear with me, I'm a little shaky. I'm a sexual assault survivor. In this time of unlearning, of challenging the way things have always been, of imagining a new way to live and thrive, silence is not an option. Like Audre Lorde said, I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal, and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. When we speak on defunding police, men have asked me, who will you call if you are raped? I want to laugh, because I don't have to wonder for long why no woman or queer person has ever asked me that question. When I was 13 years old, a group of grown men called me jailbait, following me through a parking lot. I made eye contact with an officer standing outside his patrol car, and he smiled. I knew then that he did not keep me safe. The first time I was raped, I was 17 years old. It was a man that I thought I trusted, a friend. I was afraid to call the police that night. I was under the influence. I was an addict. I was poor. I knew then that they did not keep me safe. In the back of my mother's car, feeling overcome with fear as we were pulled over and the officer won't allow us to leave without my mom agreeing to go out with him, I had to pretend to have my father on the phone to get away. I knew then that they did not keep us safe. If we weren't white, if we didn't have the resources, it could and would have been a very different story that day. Sexual violence by the police is the second most common form of police misconduct in the United States, after excessive force. A police officer is caught in an act of sexual misconduct every 5 days. Imagine what that statistic looks like if we knew how many got away or were never reported. I know that I and the rest of the freedom fighters at the People's Plaza have witnessed both in the past 2 months at the hands of THP, MNPD, COs, and TDOC. As a survivor, being thrown to the ground by 4 men is an experience I find difficult putting into words. I say this only to tell you that I would do it 100 more times if that's what it takes to achieve justice. This is a tired patriarchal system. There are currently 19 sexual assault reports recently filed against MNPD. I implore you all to call on Chief of Police John Drake and Mayor Jim Cooper to begin the investigation immediately. We will not allow a future for ourselves or generations to come where racist, sexist men abuse their power and influence policies in our democracy. One last note, and I will thankfully sit down, because this conversation isn't and shouldn't be about me. Sexual violence is an inherently racist and classist issue, and so we must center the stories and experience of Black, Indigenous women of color, of queer and trans women of color. We must protect and uplift the most vulnerable. In 2012, Rights for Girls released a report called The Sexual Abuse to Prison Pipeline, discussing the intrinsic link between incarceration of young women of color and sexual assault. Women of color, especially Black and Indigenous women below the poverty line, are exponentially more at risk for sexual violence. This is due to the same systemic violence and misogynoir that leads to the absence of resources to deal with and heal this trauma, leaving our women and girls with unaddressed trauma and vulnerable to further abuse. The time to be silent is long past. We are not free until girls of color in this country and in this community are free of fear, free to be children and to be girls. We are not free until every Black woman, every mother is free from incarceration and provided with housing, safety, resources, and opportunity. We are not free until every woman and child in fascist detention centers are free and reunited. We are not free until we are all free. These men abusing their power through state-sanctioned violence are nothing compared to the power of the people. And we will hold them accountable. And I'll ask you one time, who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe!
Paula, thank you. And you know, this is about you. And it's about you, and you, and you, and you. It's about each and every one of us. When we are not safe by the people that are supposed to keep us safe, we must speak up and we must do something about that. Now, speaking truth to power, that's part of the reason we assembled here today. Those in power were placed in power in their roles on the promise that they would protect and serve the people of Tennessee. From legislators to judges, mayors to police captains, to employers and managers, preachers and coaches, teachers, whoever you may be, all across this state, we're putting you on notice. We are watching, and we are taking action. You were put in your place to protect and serve and support the people and their organizations. When these leaders break their trust, the sacred trust placed in them, they damage the organizations they represent. They weaken our communities, and most importantly, they irreparably harm those whose job it was for them to protect. Whether harm comes from our overt actions, like wrongful incarceration of immigrants, illegal vehicle stops, erroneous arrests, defending symbols of racism, or or sexually abusing or assaulting co-workers, family members, or anyone else, or from covert actions like non-selection for jobs, termination, or passing laws to silence the voices that they do not agree with. We want to hear, and they need to hear from us. We must send a loud and clear message that we will no longer tolerate human rights violations in our state and even in our nation. We are better than this, and we can rise above and put this behind us, but we have to address it first. We cannot pretend that it is not happening. We have to address it and take action. The other reason that we are here today is to say to the brave individuals who have stepped forward to address wrongs occurring in Nashville and our state that we see you. We stand with you. To the People's Plaza movement, man, are you something. We thank you for what you've been doing and just the attention that you've been bringing to these subjects that people would rather sweep under the carpet. Fascism is alive in our state, and we must not tolerate it anymore. Sexism, bigotry, and definitely a rape culture exist, and we must push back against that and say no loudly and clearly that we will no longer tolerate this. And to anyone who hasn't felt safe enough to come forward or hasn't heard that we're out here on your behalf, you can trust us. We are going to do everything in our power to bring attention to what you've gone through and to protect you. We see you, we hear you, and we continue to pledge our support to protect you as you reclaim and regain your power. The transition from victim to survivor, it's not easy. Let's be honest, it's not easy. But you're not alone. You have us and so many more across the state. It is our privilege to support you. While we freely offer up our thoughts and prayers over these circumstances and others we know nothing about yet, we understand that thoughts and prayers are useless without action. Even the Bible tells us that faith without works is dead. We will have works and we will have action to back up our thoughts and prayers. So we vow to follow up and continue fighting for you and protecting and elevating your concerns. Thank you for trusting us with your stories. Thank you for trusting us with your lives. We'll continue to honor you and fight for you because you matter. The stories matter. And on a very personal note, we are asking that the governor listen to the People's Plaza's movement. What did they ask? They asked for you to meet them. They asked for you to listen, to consider their point of view. They're your constituents, and they just wanted to be heard. They asked for you to remove racist symbols from our capital, the people's capital, and you couldn't even do that. Get this right. Everybody is watching. The world is watching. And as far as the mayor goes, Mayor, you have shown us your willingness to come forward and address some of the problems going on in the Metro Nashville Police Department, the jewel of our state. We welcome millions of visitors to this city all the time. The idea that the very police officers that serve to protect those visitors and the people who live here, shop here, attend doctor's appointments are not safe. I can't even believe that we're even discussing this. Please continue to elevate this investigation. Take it to the TBI. Take it to the FBI. We stand with you. We're looking to you, Mayor Cooper, to be our hero. Everyone writes their story, and you have a chance in this moment in time to write yours. Will you be the hero that helps us step up and make this a reality? So we're going to remember tonight's promise of equality, liberty, and justice, because let's face it, we haven't quite fulfilled that yet. So we're asking that we, as the lighting of the candles goes around, that we honor the 25 current and former Nashville police employees who have bravely shared their story, and may the light of their courage shine forth and bring hope to those who are still struggling in the darkness. will be lighted with this candle lighting, and that we ignite a movement within you. I guess we are a little unrehearsed there. Nerves, it's always a little bit. All right. So at this point, I would like to. We're going to play a song, and then we'd like to share another story with you, and we'll be heading toward the wrap up of this meeting.
He said white lives matter. He said white lives matter.
Well, anytime that happens outside of the body, it's like she works for us.
Shut up and smile. Don't spread your head. I do that. No one knows me, no one ever will. I don't say something, I just lie still. But I'll be that monster, scare them all away. I have to say, I can't keep quiet. No, no, no. I can't keep quiet. No, no, no. Oh, one moment right. No, no, no. I can't keep quiet. Not anymore. If I don't say something, take that dry blue pill. I have to do that. I can't keep quiet. No, no, no. I can't keep quiet. No, no, no. Oh, one moment right. No, no, no. I can't keep quiet. I can't keep quiet. I can't keep quiet. I can't keep quiet. There is someone who understands. Someone who understands. Maybe someone who understands. Must be someone who understands.
To say that we've been surprised by some of the letters that we received, it wouldn't really go far enough. We received this letter the other day, and again, it's one of those stories that we should never have to hear, but we need to share it with you. I am a Metropolitan Nashville Police Department police officer, and I am a female. I have over 10 years of service, and I remain an invisible minority within the MNPD. I'm often tasked to take pictures among the community and to participate in community events. However, after the event is complete, I'm related back to invisibility. I have no voice. I haven't any influence. The present and future underrepresentation of women and minorities must be addressed. The Fraternal Order of Police, Andrew Jackson Lodge, As majority white male, their governing board has only one minority. The FOP does not speak for women and minority officers. This is evident from their silence regarding Jason Reinbold and the nationwide protest condemning police brutality. The lack of answerability of the MNPD regarding the 25 women who came forward drives home the lack of interest that the department shows to vulnerable employees. Also, their half-hearted responses ensure that women and minorities will be less inclined to speak up in the future. If Jason Reinbold is near me, I feel unsafe. After watching the video of him berating and cursing a woman and children and the sexual assault allegations, I feel that he may commit bodily harm. The department has made excuses for his unethical acts, and I feel that if it's my word against his, I will be victimized. I don't feel safe at my job. Maslow's theory places psychological needs as a basis. I work in an environment where I feel that if I make the wrong person upset, become noticed, or indeed unnecessary, I will lose my job or be harassed to the point that I resign. I don't feel safe working around other officers that feel entitled to sexually harass or sexually assault women. Also, I feel that Jason Reinbold has been protected by Interim Chief Drake, Deputy Chief Henry, Deputy Chief Huggins, HR Director Sue Bibb, and OPA Director Kathy Moranti. In addition, Don Aaron consistently brushes aside the allegations of the 25 females. Steve Anderson is gone, but his legacy continues. The legacy includes huge disparities in pay, promotions, recognition of women and minorities. All the civilian bureau directors are white. Currently, 3 commanders are black males. Anderson manipulated the promotion system, often passing over and intimidating qualified employees, and placed compliant persons in positions of power and influence. These actions created the toxic atmosphere that wreaked havoc on the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department and the citizens of Davidson County. The persons in power have been willing participants in damaging police department employees' esteem, needs, and their desire to reach self-actualization. This is accomplished by women and minorities not being assigned to special teams, detective positions, and supervisory positions. Most of the women and minority supervisors remain within the patrol community and service bureau. Minorities and women are deemed insignificant and are not included within the core leadership of the MNPD. I have seen the department invite women to participate in a Ring the Bell photo op and will attempt to have a female trainee class. Isn't this what civil rights leaders fought and died in an attempt to end? We want to go back to separate but equal. The only way to make employees feel safe is by unsilenced, included, and respected is to follow the civil service rules and treat everyone with fairness. Within 5 years, there will be a Steve Anderson created void of female and minority leadership. There will not be anyone left to ring the bell. This month is the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. We honor the women who fought for our voting rights, and we honor courage and tenacity. I especially want to recognize Mary Church Terrell, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and our own Ida B. Wells, and all the strong black suffragettes who all too often are forgotten. We will ring the bell once in honor of the suffragettes and once if each of the 25 women have come forward in hopes of ending the cover-up within the Nashville Police Department. Greta, would you ring the bell for us? And would you come forward?
police officer told us. Stories like that is why we are not at all surprised that the number of resignations nearly doubled while Chief Anderson was chief. Former Chief Anderson. In the 8 years between 2004 and 2012, there were a total of 274 resignations, an average of 34 a year. None of us think that it's a coincidence that according to everything we've been told with the boys club really coming into power in late 2012, we don't think it's a coincidence that in just 6 years, between 2013 and 2019, there were 362 resignations, or 60 per year, almost double. There's no doubt at all that there is a toxic and even physically dangerous culture within the MNPD. And I'm not talking about the danger of being shot in the line of duty or something like that. I'm talking about danger from your fellow officers. That culture did not happen overnight. Those in power at the department, whether it's the chief or deputy chiefs, even the commanders, if they didn't at minimum help to foster and nurture this culture, they're still complicit because they had to at least make a choice to ignore the growing sexism and racism within the department. They had to choose to ignore the disparity when it comes to applying disciplinary action. They had to make a conscious choice to ignore or condone violations of departmental policies and procedures. And they have chosen to ignore continued cover-up of crimes committed by the boys club. You know, it doesn't surprise us that 24 women have come forward. It saddens us, but it doesn't surprise us knowing what's going on. 24 women who were so terrified to come forward to the people that are in place that are supposed to help them. Human Resources, Office of Professional Accountability, they were terrified to go to them because they'd seen what happened to other women who made that choice. So they decided to trust us, people they didn't know. I mean, all they see is this Facebook page or this free Wix website, and they felt safer coming and talking to us than the people that are supposed to be protecting them. All right, I get a little emotional sometimes when I think about that. But the fact that they chose to do that instead of talking to those that are supposed to help us, that tells you how deep the toxicity is. And it may or may not surprise you that sexual assault is one of the lowest reported, or is the lowest reported violent crime in the country. It's about 24%. But that falls dramatically to 6.6% if you're a black female. And can anybody guess why it falls to that? Mistrust of law enforcement and the judicial system. Imagine. Now, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that all cops are bad. I'm a former police officer. I work for Nashville Police Department, and I'm proud that I had the chance to serve my community. And I'm absolutely outraged at the fact that now I'm afraid to tell people that I used to work for the department because I don't blame them if they react badly considering everything that's going on. That outrages me. It should. People become police officers to help people, or they should. And that's not what is happening. So, not all of them are bad, that I know. There's good people, bad people, just like with any profession. But there's a big difference between a bad cop and a bad mechanic. There's a big difference between a cop trying to cover up wrongdoing and a crooked bank teller. Yeah, you may get ripped off, may make it hard for you to pay your bills, pay your mortgage, whatever, because you got ripped off, but you're probably not going to get shot. You're probably not going to get raped. You're probably not going to be called up to jail because you dared to use the same sidewalk chalk. And I imagine a lot of our lawmakers up there, their children or grandchildren have used many times, but we're the ones who end up going to jail for sidewalk chalk because we dare speak truth to power. So, yeah, there's a huge difference. And there has been a blatant and unapologetic effort by Governor Bill Lee, hi Mr. Governor, and the House leadership to cover up corruption. And it's been continuing a long time. They're still covering up for an admitted child molester who's getting paid by our tax dollars, and they don't have any trouble with that. They fund David Byrd, yes. Dirty Bird, yeah. They tried to cover up for Cassida until the scandals just kept coming so frequently and so fast that they gave up. There just wasn't any more covering up for it. So their bright plan was to have a no confidence vote. Yeah, a no confidence vote that has no teeth whatsoever. They couldn't kick him out. They could, well, they could. They weren't going to. They couldn't force him to resign. They weren't about to have an ethics investigation, so they had this little no confidence vote. They put on a little show, making it look like they cared, hoping that we wouldn't notice. Speaker Sexton, we noticed. We are also noticing what's going on in the Metro Nashville Police Department. We mentioned Don Aaron earlier. When somebody asked him about the allegations about sexual assault, about Captain Ronbold, he said that the allegations were absolutely false. The director of Office of Professional Accountability, Kathy Morante, she told me in an email there's no evidence whatsoever that Captain Ronbold has ever been arrested for any matter involving domestic violence. She told me that in writing. Still have the email chain. Despite the fact that she received the case numbers back in April. And the mayor and the chief received those same case numbers back in April, but they're still trying to deny it. All they have to do is call the TBI and say, hey, can you send all those records over? Because it took me less than 2 minutes to find TCA 4032-101. All they got to do is call, ask, they get them, because it can be released to law enforcement agencies, and I don't know about y'all, but the last time I checked, Metro Nashville Police Department was a law enforcement agency. They don't want them because they don't want to find the evidence. If they did, they would do something. Then they want to try to discredit us, saying that, hey, they called us, we just won't talk to them. We haven't returned their calls or won't cooperate. Apparently, me calling, explaining the allegations, listening to Detective White, hearing him say, Well, we haven't heard anything about anything like that. Sending him the survey link that he wanted and following up and clarifying some statistical information isn't considered following up with him. I don't know what is, but that wasn't. So I'm going to finally be quiet here in just a second. Acting Chief Drake says that he has a plan. His plan is to have the minuscule number of female officers reach out and try to recruit more females. And to have a police academy class with all females. Well, let me tell you, that plan is a total waste of time and taxpayer money, because we've had people from as far west as Nevada and Arizona, as far east as Maine. We've had people from Canada, the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Australia, France, Germany contact us, tell those ladies that we support them, and thank them for their courage. It's gone worldwide. And after this is all over, I'll play something for y'all if y'all want to hear it. For those that don't know the name, Reverend Naomi Tutu, the daughter of Bishop Desmond Tutu, she sent us a video telling the survivors, we believe you, we're here for you, thank you for your courage. Do you think if it's gotten that far that any woman who wants to be a police officer in the United States doesn't know what's going on? They're not going to want to come here. And if they do, they're probably not going to stay very long once they see the boys come. So, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I have a plan. Get rid of the people that have allowed this culture to fester. You got a cancer, you cut it out. You have a piece of fruit going bad, you cut it out. You got a police department going bad, cut it out. We need a chief and deputy chiefs from outside the Metro Nashville Police Department, preferably outside the state. And we need new leadership for OPA and HR from outside the state. That's the only way we're going to free it up. And if Mayor Cooper, if he's a man of his word and he does truly want to earn the trust of the community, he doesn't have a choice. He doesn't have a choice. He has to agree to bring in people from outside and to let the voices of those who've been harmed be heard. Have at least one advocate from the Black community, at least one advocate. One advocate from the Hispanic Latinx community, one advocate at least from sexual assault, and at least one member of the Community Oversight Board on the hiring panel. Because you can't earn the trust of people if you don't allow their voices to be heard and to give them equal voice in the hiring process.